months. What was going on with me before starting the patches? I have a long history and a big collection of x-rays and diagnoses, dozens of diagnoses. Mostly what they all come from is I've been in 4 serious motor vehicle crashes. I've had I count at least 17 bone fractures. And, along with healing from all of those, various musculoskeletal issues, mostly, I guess, muscle pain, limited range of motion. I've had to learn to walk a few times. I have 8 fractures, healed fractures in my pelvis alone. So that's and the pelvis is part of your core. So if you lose muscle around that, it just makes everything else more difficult. So I had not been able to walk very easy when I was born. I think it was my left leg was shorter than my right leg, and that's pretty typical with people. But after the first automobile crash, I had 6 fractures in my pelvis, and my right leg was shorter than my left. So God went a little off on that realignment. So by the time I was 50 years old, that also had resulted in osteoarthritis diagnosis and bursitis diagnosis. And I was trying traditional Western forms of coping with the pain and with the limited range of motion and loss of strength, physical therapy, pain management, using different kinds of meds, muscle relaxers, and just none of it was really working for me. None of it is really a long-term solution. I finally discovered yoga, and yoga made a great difference for me in terms of flexibility, but it still, by the end of the day, I would be really, really, really tense. I also spent 12 years hoteling before hoteling was coined. For those of you who don't know about hoteling, that's basically where you work for a corporation, but your office is in your backpack. So I had a backpack on wheels, and for 12 years, I toted that behind me. So that led to a bunch of shoulder girdle issues on top of the hip girdle issues. So needless to say, I was frequently in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I remember that you said that just even going up the stairs, you had to use that railing because you didn't have the endurance, you didn't have the strength, not only, but for shoulders and pelvic girdle, correct?
Yes, that's right. And I used to carry my cane in my trunk because for a while, I never knew what day I was going to come out of the office building and just need to use the cane for some support. But yeah, going up the stairs was always very hard. So when I bought a home, I made sure it was a single story home, and didn't have a basement. And that's another thing that contributed to my injuries. One day while hoteling in a 2-story building that did not have an elevator, I fell up the stairs, and that aggravated the shoulder injury. So, and as well as, it hurt my knees.
When did you find the patches, and who introduced you to them?
Two more things I forgot to tell you. Also, traumatic brain injury, again from that first automobile crash. I was in a coma for 10 days. And so I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor and of course that also means post-traumatic stress, which is giving me hyperanxiety, hypersensitivity. Those are all good things. I've spent a lot of time trying to learn, studying neuroscience and looking at brain injuries, how other people have survived in order to, help myself. So when the patch came along, that property that I mentioned, that a single story home that I mentioned, I had turned it into a rental property because I moved for love. unfortunately, that house, the 1940s cottage, had a stairs, and so that was always a struggle for me. And by the way, in August of 21, I fell down those stairs, rushing out the house to get on the boat to go fishing, and I broke my tailbone and added another crack to my pelvis. And by that time, my primary care physician was telling me that my DEXA scans were showing that my bone density had dropped below what it needed to be. And so now I was in osteoporosis. I had been in osteopenia for a couple of years, but then I went into osteoporosis. And so she was telling me, well, now we need to put you on medication because you've had your 2 fractures, and that's what the medical standard is. If you've had fractures after an osteoporosis diagnosis, you're supposed to go on medication. I said, no, let me try it and heal myself with, lifestyle changes. So the house I had turned into a rental property. Well, that I wasn't a very good long distance landlord, and so I was looking at an eviction and then a major cleanup process because I think that family had never ever cleaned the house, and that put me into a depression also. So that was the summer of last year.
So when did you start getting involved with the patches, and what changes do you see that came about for you?
In September of last year, my friend Barbara, she had been posting about these patches, so I called her and I asked her, and she talked to me about it and said that it could help. So I decided that I would try it. And boy, am I glad that I did, because by mid-September, I had the patches, and within the first week, I had an ease of movement about my entire body, but especially in my lower back that I don't think I've ever had. I don't remember ever having that. So I was able to go up and down the stairs without assistance. I was able to rise from the chair without having to push myself up or, use the arm to pull myself forward to get out of the chair. That was all very good. My strength was coming back. I went, within, I guess, right at the end of the first month, I had an opportunity to go on a breast cancer awareness walk, and I hadn't trained or conditioned for it, but I walked 6 miles that day, and I didn't even feel it. I felt so fabulous at the end of it. I just was amazed that my body was able to do that. The patches has been wonderful. It evened out my mood. I noticed almost immediately that I was sleeping better, and probably because my back was feeling so much better. My neck, I've had several issues with my neck. All that pain went away. Fibromyalgia diagnosis says that if you press on any of a number of joints, I want to say that there's over a dozen joints that you could press on, and if you press on them and there's pain, then that's what the fibromyalgia diagnosis is based on. Well, none of my joints are achy like that anymore, including my shoulders. So, and that all happened within the first month. I am so grateful for the patch.
With your with patching, you mentioned earlier about your traumatic brain injury and PTSD. Has that improved as well?
Yes, I am much calmer than I was. My memory is good now. I do other things like I use Ayurvedic modalities to try to maintain my brain health as well. But yes, my clarity is different. I used to have to make lists on all kinds of things, and sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and be sort of paranoid that I had forgotten to do something, but that doesn't happen to me anymore. So I do have the easiness of movement, but I also have a easiness in my mind as well, a calm.
And lastly, how is that? You said osteoarthritis. Has that seemed to improve, obviously?
Yes. Now I mentioned the osteoporosis as well. I'll have a DEXA scan coming up within the next month or so, and so I'll be able to compare those numbers. I'm interested to see if there's any change in that, because that'll be the empirical side of things. But yes, yes, movement's easier, my strength is easier, my clarity is easier. Oh, another thing about the fibromyalgia. So if something happened, and that could just be a mental trauma, normally what would happen is it would trigger responses and pain everywhere else. You know, like if it happened to one joint, it would happen to all the joints. If a pain happened, emotional pain happened, or a high stress point, like cleaning up that rental property was a high stress point. It used to be that that would trigger other reactions, other pain, but that didn't happen to me. I cleaned up that rental property, including an hour drive over to it and an hour drive back to it, in less than a month, and it was easy.